Hey, how's it been? Not a year goes by where I don't find the size of berries nowadays frightening. Like how how does a plant shell off something this huge? And we only see that kind of growth in the plant space too. It's not like you look at medical records over the last 20, 30 years and you're seeing babies are being born at like 40 pounds. I am recording this on Saturday, July 6th. It's 4:30 p.m. right now. On one of my many monitors back here, I have Criterion 24/7 running. Right now, Abigail's Party is on. It looks like a stage play that they shot into a movie. And from what I googled, it's one of those movies where it takes place in a single space, as plays do, and all the characters just kind of talk about their lives. So, riveting stuff from the Brits over there. I can't even recall when my last upload was on this channel, but many reasons exist as to why I have not been uploading. All of them personal, because this is my personal channel. There is nothing professional about anything that's going up on here, and I don't hold any kind of professional responsibility to that. This is my space for fun and for shouting into the void, which I'm starting to feel like doing again. There was a while where I felt like it was useless just talking to nothing, but as I'm seeing all the spin that's happening nowadays with news and everything else all around the world, and they're all just talking into nothing too for the most part, why shouldn't I hop in on that fun? Because fun is probably the exact word to describe it. I've had so many things on my mind. All of these thoughts I've decided to keep to myself because I didn't think I was really in much of a space to share any kind of interesting ideas or even to kind of pontificate my way through something live recorded at the time into some kind of almost like gradual realization of a video, like trying to find some kind of point through 20 minutes of mud and other types of nothings that I could possibly spout out in the roundabout way to get there. I mean, you're listening right now. I don't know what the hell I've said. One thing that I was thinking about today is kind of just the roots of inspiration. That's the place where I'm at currently, just as I'm getting ready to be in between yet another project. Of course, the project I have been working on is not YouTube related. It's all live stuff that I'm doing and performing and just almost at the finish line of, at this point for this year at least. But that means I'm getting ready to start walking and starting to run the race again of making stuff and finding things that are interesting to me. And so here's where I started thinking all about inspiration. As I said, I'm watching Criterion 24/7 on my other monitor while I'm doing some other work, and they're playing a bunch of Japanese monster movies. First one isn't really much of a monster movie. It has kind of a supernatural element to it, though. It was called The Cat, and I gathered that it was about like an extraterrestrial woman and an extraterrestrial cat, and I guess hijinks ensue. They definitely ensued inside of that movie. There was a lot of fun stuff going. Well, probably not fun if like it was actually happening to you. It would probably be more scary, but in the Schadenfreude of just being the outside observer, it looked pretty fun. And I guess also when you think about how it's all fake, it also looks pretty fun. But it would be scary if it was real. And then after that movie was this 1966 film called Abira, Horror in the Darkness, Horror of the Darkness. It's one of those two, but it's another Japanese monster movie about this mutant lobster that lives in the ocean, and then sure enough, Godzilla shows up, and it becomes a fight between Godzilla and Abira, and then I think at the end of the movie they allude to Mothra coming into play. I was kind of in and out of the movie, but I was thinking about how that genre of film in Japan has such a stark start point that you can very easily trace the threads of inspiration that conjured the idea of the monster movie in Japan. Not that, monster movies are anything new, but then also kind of explain how a story like that could be so resonant inside of not just that country. Like, inevitably, the whole world ends up falling in love with these Godzilla movies and just those types of monster fighting movies in general. Obviously, I'm sure most people understand that Godzilla is inspired by the bombings at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, just given the horror of a singular entity, in this case, the nuclear bomb, being able to just be dropped over the country, over these towns and cities, and the devastating impact that it has on millions of people. Just the loads of people that can die in a moment. They die in just the aftermath of it, in the fallout of it, and Godzilla rises from that generational trauma in Japan, quite obviously. I mean, he as a monster embodies that type of destructive entity that something like the nuclear bomb is capable, except he is just the vessel of that horror as a monster whose vulnerabilities are unknown. He has pretty much no weaknesses. He's done when he's done. He does whatever he wants, and that's ultimately the scary part of a monster like him. You cannot predict what he's going to do, or I guess she's going to do, because I don't know if it's canon that Godzilla's a mommy, or if it was just that one movie where Godzilla's a mommy, and then Matthew Broderick goes,
"That's what he's doing in New York. He's nesting."
Where's the fun in that?
But the through line is clear in what made Godzilla the monster and the movie and the story. Godzilla is this creature capable of mass destruction. And you have no control over what it is Godzilla is going to do, in a similar way that you could be just living your life in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, minus the weird kind of alert that people gave of the bombings that were going to happen. Even if you have the alert, you're never prepared for something like a giant bomb to go and fall on the place you live, and the destruction that arises from that blast of just the instant death in the aftermath of it, and the fallout of it all. No human is capable of being prepared for something like that. And so you see that type of fear in play. Oh, I'm getting a phone call. All right, that phone call was only kind of important, but in all of this, I got my own little monster to show up and talking about this. You want to look at the camera? You want to show everyone how big of a monster you are? You want to show them your bite? Do ya? Aw. Are you scared? You want nothing to do with me? We don't know if she did or did not come from like a nuclear waste pit, or like that's what could make something like her, because obviously she's a dog, but as you can also tell just by looking at her, there are many other animals that are pushed into her to make her look both like a deer and a jackrabbit. And so we don't know if like her litter that she came from was around like a vat of acid, and then she might have been from a family of jackrabbits, and the acid actually did the reverse of mutation, where you think a mutant gets bigger. It actually made her smaller. But also jackrabbits are pretty much this size too, now that I think about it. You done here? Are you done here? Are you done? You gonna leave? You can stay if you want. I just have to remember where my thought was. You're done. You okay? You okay? You okay? Are you okay? She got caught on the wire, so but it took her body about like a second or two to recalibrate from getting caught on the wire. But from what I remember, I was saying that when you live through something like a nuclear bombing and are attempting to process the trauma of everything, of just rationalizing the loss of life, of even just why it could happen. The why is the biggest thing that gets lost on a lot of people. And of course, historically you could say, well, Truman didn't want to land on the shores and all that stuff. But if you look at it from just a general person's perspective, allegiances aside, if you're pro-Japanese Empire, not, a tragedy like that is simply unfathomable. And what's kind of beautiful then about a story like Godzilla is it's people taking that trauma of living through that experience and in one way trying to rise above it by co-opting the event, if you will, from taking it as something that had happened onto these people, and now it is this piece that then you have control over processing through storytelling. You're in a way taking the power of that tragedy that happened to you and evoking that or invoking that into the story that you're trying to tell, which has the capability of making that whole generational trauma much easier to process for other people. The allure of the Japanese monster movie comes from this generational feeling that life can be wiped from you in a second and be done by either a large entity, a small entity. You even think to the other types of catastrophes that happen in a place like Japan. Tsunamis, earthquakes. There are several examples which embody that chaos coming from something that you can only attribute to God. And so then it makes sense of people who lived through that event and were a part of the rebuilding culture in Japan after the fall of the empire, that stories like this would feel so resonant. They're a parallel telling of this generational trauma, of this inexplicable tragedy that millions lived through or were adjacent to. And that's interesting to me, because what it informs is that creativity itself is not, it's not this stratosphere that hovers above us. Creativity is a plant. It's rooted in something always, whether it be a tragedy, a joyous event, anything. There are threads that then evolve into these almost entirely different stories, but the themes to those stories are almost exact to the inspiring event. And all of this is more of a reminder of just what the whole process is, at least to me, because I think about trying to tell stories and how to like redesign them based off of events in my life just to make them more interesting or more compelling. And there's a certain element where I feel that we're not supposed to show our cards. It's almost like when you're making a movie or you're making a story, you're entering into a poker game, but you don't want people to know you even have a hand. You want to just throw this thing at them and make them feel like they're experiencing something that's almost like above human. Even if it's a story that's just about people, when you get into the pathos of any type of story, it has that transcendent type of feeling where you have this connection to things that are beyond yourself. I have no idea what was on my mouth. And that's the most powerful piece of any story. That makes any story, no matter what it's about, interesting. You could tell a story about an accountant, and as long as there is some sort of emotional pungency to how you're presenting that story, it is inherently interesting. The vehicles that you take for telling your tale are interchangeable ultimately. And many people who write stories understand this. This is Ecclesiastes ain't nothing new under the sun. You can tell a Shakespearean story in 20 different ways through 20 different plots, and you can see the parallels. You can do the same with so many other types of movies. You can boil it down even simpler to just the phenomenons of man versus nature, man versus man, and then there you only have like 6 possible stories to tell, and yet there are endless stories told. How do you tell those stories? And it all comes back to that main point of the emotional resonance. How do you make something that strikes at people's core? And something like the Kaiju movies in Japan, it's such a simple example of finding that inspiration, of seeing what springboarded something as abstract as giant monsters fighting over Japan. Even if something like giant monsters is not anything new. You know, you look back to the 20s, you have Frankenstein, you have all these other types of monster things that are in the... You go back even to folklore. Folklore is chock full of monsters. In the West, in, you know, the Dark Ages, even inside of, you know, some Japanese mythology, so on and so forth. It's nothing new. But when you think about making a story like Godzilla, what does Godzilla represent? That is my overall point in just kind of looking at this, is reminding myself that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You do not have to go up to God and steal fire and then hope that he never finds out and then ties you up and pokes and prods all of your itty-bitty organs through the eternity of time. You don't have to do that. You know, Martin Scorsese ain't Prometheus. Paul Thomas Anderson ain't the guy who invented the steam engine. I don't even think the guy who invented... Do you think the steam engine also came from God? So would he be pissed that it was stolen? I get so caught up in the spectacle of filmmaking and storytelling where I feel like when I'm presenting a story that the closer it is to my actual experience, the less interesting of a story it is. And to a certain extent, that's true. Just in terms of the creativity of presenting that story and on also how you can make a story like that more resonant for people who are beyond you. And even if me, in this case, is like Caucasian male, the point still rings true. I've always felt that there's a laziness to that one-to-one adaptation of personal life events, or even like taking idioms that you've learned from your life and telling stories that are verbatim those idioms, versus taking that as a piece and then layering it under a story about a guy who wants a really fast car or some bullshit like that. Filmmaking is a delicate line, and it always has been, because of just the concept of verisimilitude, where you are having to get people to buy into your world. You are wanting to create such a layer of mysticism in front of them that they stay on board the ride from start to finish, and they don't start thinking about they don't start thinking about the movie. They experience the movie, and to accomplish something like that, is difficult. And so I feel it's helpful to remind myself that sometimes inspiration can be as simple as making a Godzilla, as looking at this piece that's almost impossible to understand that you lived through, or even that was something that happened to people you know, or people you grew up with, people you live around. Some type of inexplicable horror like that. Or you could even take it as the most joyous thing ever of like your first child being born, or other events like that. And you can very easily just morph that into something as singular as the nuclear bomb is the equivalent of Godzilla. It can just be that simple. And you can tell a story that is interesting, is compelling, and is fun to watch. As difficult as storytelling and as filmmaking can be, sometimes you don't have to go and write the Da Vinci Code. But I'm not talking like, the actual book, the Da Vinci Code, more like just a Da Vinci. You don't have to write your own cryptography about whatever story it is you're telling. You just have to tell an interesting story, and a story that feels truthful to you, authentic to you, and compelling to you. And inevitably, others will find it interesting. Now then, I don't know how long I've been recording. Hopefully, this video is shorter than the length of this recording, because I'm going into the edit, and I will do my best to make the thoughts that I spit out flow nicely and make sense, because at this moment, I'm really empathizing with being an 82-year-old man in the White House. Minus like, everything that has happened with like the Middle East and all that. I don't empathize with that. I wouldn't have done that if I was him. Probably gonna cut that joke, because I don't want people to think I'm a warmonger, when I, if anything, can't monger to save my life. I couldn't fishmonger even, let alone war. Alright, I'm done here.